the International Summit Council for Peace, as it was explained in the previous session, the opening plenary. This is the organization, the UPF Association, dedicated, composed of the current, former head of states, head of governments, presidents, vice presidents, prime ministers, and current and former. Under the general theme of the ILC, discussing the challenges and opportunities in the post-COVID era, this session will discuss the new paradigm for international relations in the post-COVID era. And to discuss this timely topic, we have a very solid and a very good panel. The panel composed of European prominent leaders and also African leaders. Now, allow me to introduce to you our wonderful panel today. Maybe before I go into that, I would like to send you apologies from His Excellency Olusegun Obasanjo, the former president of the Nigeria, who was supposed to join us, but unfortunately, he became sick and could not join us today. He's seeking for your support in prayers for his speedy recovery. Today, we are very lucky to have Mrs. Marie-Louise Kolero-Preka as the first speaker. President Kolero-Preka served in politics for 45 years. She was the very first elected female general secretary of one of the two main political parties in Malta. She served in the National Parliament for 16 years. She also served at the Council of Europe. And as Minister for the Family and Social Solidarity, she initiated numerous social reforms in her country. The Maltese Parliament unanimously elected Mrs. Kolero-Preka as President of Malta in 2010. She founded and chairs the Malta Foundation for the Well-being of Society, the Malta Trust Foundation, and Emmanuel Cancer Research Foundation, Malta. So to begin and to break the ice, let me now give the floor to President Kolero-Preka for her presentation. Your Excellency.
Thank you, Mr. Adama Dumia. Your Excellencies, good morning to everyone. Well, this part of the world we're still morning. And thank you to the Universal Peace Federation for inviting me to this webinar. If COVID-19 has shown us anything, it surely has shown us that our world is very fragile. It is now common knowledge that the pandemic has significantly affected the social, economic development of our human family. It has wiped out, and it is still wiping out, much of the social, economic progress we have achieved over the years. It has shown us that we lack resilience. It has showed us that we lack solidarity. The pandemic has also brought to light that some countries lack meaningful leadership. The pandemic has affected all of humanity. However, its negative effects have compounded even more on pre-COVID vulnerable communities, of children and women in particular. This situation is evidenced in research studies conducted by OECD and UNICEF. It is therefore salient to point out that the effects of COVID-19 are dangerously bringing a regression in children's rights and gender equality. The new reality that is emerging is that the dimension and definition of poverty has continued to expand. COVID-19 has undoubtedly changed the goalposts that were set by the widely agreed and approved United Nations Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It is this serious consequence that must spur us all to find innovative and creative ways to rapidly intervene in a multilateral approach to limit the damage and overcome the huge challenges that this pandemic has created to one and all. Multilaterally, we must persuade that state capacity, social trust, social solidarity, unity, and leadership are all essential components to limit the damage and to create the necessary resilience for our nations to face these unprecedented challenges. When leaders promote division through populist and nationalistic rhetoric, rather than encourage unity and solidarity, all possibilities of the necessary successful outcomes are shattered. Encouraging a rise in nationalism brings together the necessary ingredients for social tensions and international conflict. It definitely is not the time where states should be looking inwards and playing the blame game. Global solidarity is key to fighting COVID-19 and its consequences. A constructive partnership between Europe and Africa is imperative. Europe and Africa are twin continents. As former President of the European Commission, Mr. Jean-Claude Juncker described them in his State of the Union speech in 2018. Building meaningful multilateral partnerships has never been so necessary for our world. This is not rocket science. It is, after all, the essential meaning of Goal 17 of Agenda 2030. SDG 17 is clear on the need to strengthen the means of implementation and to revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development as a first step to overcome the tragedy that has befallen on humankind. It is unfortunate that with less than 10 years to go to reach this goal, we are still too far away. The pandemic has revealed the injustices, the inequalities, and the lack of equity that exists in our world and further compounded them. We need to collectively take the urgent and necessary actions to safeguard humanity from falling into an abyss of extremities. It is today's choices that will determine how far-reaching the negative effects of the pandemic will be in the future. In my opinion, there is no real choice, as the need for collective action to rebuild economies, to deliver inclusive economic growth and prosperity, and holistic well-being for all is fundamental. Vulnerable communities have been hit the hardest, and without universal social protection and a strong healthcare system, the gap of inequalities will further widen. Identifying ways to address COVID-19 and learning from the success stories of other countries is crucial. A crisis like this should be tackled through increased multilateral exchanges of experience, knowledge sharing, and joint action. A human rights framework should provide a crucial structure that can strengthen the effectiveness of global efforts to address the pandemic without leaving anyone behind. I would like to reiterate the need for the international community to be seriously concerned on how the pandemic has transformed children's lives. Children's routine has been disrupted. An entire generation of children has seen their education being discontinued. The lockdown of schools affected more than 1.5 billion of children and youth. The digital divide has never been so evident. Children are our most precious and important assets. We cannot miss out on the essential fundamentals for the development of the full potential of our present and our future generations. Education must be given priority at all times, but even more so during this critical time. International development experts are predicting that tens of millions of students in the world's poorest nations may never go back to school. This would be a tragedy for the whole of humanity. We also need to address the pandemic's longer-term effect on children's health. 30 million children receive free or subsidized school lunches. The lack of healthy nutrition, combined with more sedentary activities imposed by social distancing instructions, are likely to have a long-lasting effect on the overall health of the global population in the future. Children living in poverty are affected even harder, and the pandemic has the potential to widen the gap between the advantaged and the disadvantaged. OECD indicates that on average, 1 in 7 children grows in poverty. We need to address child poverty urgently and seriously so as not to further jeopardize the rights of our children. Support from governments, local authorities, and non-governmental organizations must work with and for the peoples badly affected to ensure that fundamental human rights are rightfully enjoyed by all. This has been also emphasized by the Director General of the World Health Organization, whereby he emphasized, and I will quote, all countries must strike a fine balance between protecting health, minimizing economic and social disruption, and respecting human rights. As a woman from the Mediterranean, it is in this context that I believe that both Europe and Africa can benefit from each other's potential and experiences. The European Union can benefit substantially by effectively collaborating with the African Union. A prosperous Africa would provide new opportunities for investment and the supply of skilled new workforce. Europeans must acknowledge that Africa is a land of opportunity and that it is not up for exploitation. Africa can provide Europe with the necessary growth and prosperity that it needs. This can be done by developing the necessary effective partnerships with the African Union. This is the only way forward I see for the region I come from. This undoubtedly can be a win-win situation for Africans, Europeans, and all the peoples of the Mediterranean. In this context, I must mention what the President of the new European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, so ably emphasized recently. It is encouraging to know that Madame von der Leyen stated that the European Union wants to establish greater political, economic, and investment opportunities between Europe and Africa, and move towards a partnership of equals beyond the donor-recipient relationship. This is the necessary paradigm shift that is needed. The relationship between European states and African states has historically been, unfortunately, shaped by the pursuit of European interests around influence, wealth, economic growth, power, and politics. We all need to acknowledge that this type of relationship is bound to fail. Inclusive dialogue, genuine political will, and strong determination are the components that can move us forward. The relationship between our two continents have to be built on a partnership of equals. Gone are the days where Europe projects and dictates what it believes best for the African continent. No one knows what Africa needs better than the Africans themselves. We cannot drag our feet any longer. We cannot be complacent. We have agreed to a shared vision of a world without discrimination. We cannot ignore the international community. What the international community in itself have agreed upon in 2015 through Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I urge everyone to endeavor relentlessly to make this happen. The pandemic has brought new, unprecedented challenges to Europe. However, this is also a time of opportunity. The European Union must take up the opportunity to look not only within itself, but even more so beyond its borders, to ensure growth and prosperity. A partnership based on respect between our two continents can create a global model of equity, inclusion, and dignity, which all transpire into a culture of sustainable peace for our peoples In this context, it is also encouraging to note what the EU's foreign policy chief, Mr. Josep Borrell, said, and I quote, "If we don't solve the problem in Africa, we will not be able to solve the problem in Europe. Africa is of particular concern to us. We must be optimistic and perceive this uncertain time as an opportunity for reflection and decision to mend what we have broken in the past. There's no denying that European history of colonization has left its mark on the African continent. In the process, it unfortunately also served to build a false conviction that Europeans are privileged and superior. At a time, however, where interconnectedness is the only solution and way forward, we know that previous misconceptions are invalid, misleading, and deceptive. I believe that the pandemic has created an ideal opportunity to transform the old expired model. Our one human family deserves the opportunity to develop in peace and prosperity. This can only be achieved if the international community enhances its efforts to acknowledge our natural interdependence, our work together to reach the goals as set through Agenda 2030. We managed to reach the goals set through the Sustainable Development Goals. We will undoubtedly ensure that universal values are truly and effectively universal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much, Your Excellency. That was really very informative, and that was a very good ice-breaking. I think the other panelists will now feel very comfortable. Maybe I did not mention that we have more prominent, some additional prominent leaders like former Prime Minister of Gabon, Prime Minister of Kosovo, former Prime Minister of Burkina Faso, and the Chairman of UPF Africa on this panel. So please don't go away and get ready now for the second panelist. I feel like this session will be very, very informative, and I can see that also we have many questions already coming in. So thank you very much, Your Excellency, for this presentation, and thank you for touching all the important points related to this theme of the ILC in this special session in the new paradigm in the international relations, especially between Africa and Europe. It is now my honor to introduce the second speaker, His Excellency Paul Mba from Gabon. He's a member of the Gabonese Democratic Party. He served for years as a minister in government prior to his appointment as Prime Minister. Many capacities, many ministerial positions in the government of Gabon. From 2012 to 2015, he was president of the Economic and Social Council of Gabon. And he has again served in the government as the first deputy prime minister for health since 2015. After studying, this is now his background, after studying business administration at the University of Rennes in France, he served several important posts in banking and finance, as well as political advisor to the president and Minister of Trade, Minister of Consumption, Transfer of Technology. He's a prominent leader, very well-known, a very listened, wise leader from Gabon. Join me now to welcome to the podium to speak, to give his presentation, His Excellency Paul Biogé Mba, Prime Minister of Gabon.
Yeah, merci d'abord de m'avoir invité et merci pour cette présentation.
Thank you for inviting me. I would like to extend my greetings to all the eminent speakers who are here today connected. And I would like to congratulate the previous speaker for her intervention. I would like first rapidly my intervention will be in two parts.
Le choc provoqué par la COVID-2019, tant sur le périmètre.
The COVID-19 has introduced a great shock to the international community. First, because it was a very devastating disease. And second, because of all its economic impacts. I'm thinking very deeply of all the victims of this disease throughout the world. It has killed many people, but it has also triggered tensions on the international scale, in international relations. There have been many changes on the political, geostrategic scale also. And the global order today has changed. Globalization has shown its limits, and we have seen them through this pandemic. But I think that we can use this this opportunity to find solutions for later, so that we can start a new era after the COVID-19 in a totally open way. There are many ideas that emerge from around the world about new paradigms, like deglobalization. Do we need to go backwards regarding the role of the states and their relationships and deglobalize? And those theories emerge. This terrible disease has triggered about a lot of cases, positive cases. And of course, our relationships as a country to the international institutions have been stressed due to that disease. What can we do? What can we do from tomorrow onwards? Well, some can say that we would need to go out of the international associations. It is important to build a win-win relationship between Africa and Europe. And I would like to stress several points to achieve that. We need to increase international solidarity. At the center of the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to have at the center culture, environment, education, social protection, social welfare. Because the human being needs to be at the center of the development and the finality of development. Also, we need to think about the environment. Without the sea and the oceans, we cannot live on this planet. And if there is life on this planet, it's because there is water. This is the first point that I would like to say today. And then I would like to talk about the African countries. The second point is how can we strengthen the economy in all our countries, especially when we look at the health sector. For instance, when we look at the masks problem, the mask is one of the most efficient measures to fight the pandemic, but we have seen that we have had difficulties to get masks. Also, energy is very important to have national security. The third point is that due to the new norms, the measures are like such social distanciation are modified, and as a consequence, new measures have to be put into practice. So, for instance, this webinar contributes to that. The fourth point is that we need to embody our own identity and culture. We cannot reject them. We have seen that very well. The Gabonese African culture has been muzzled during the pandemic. The traditional chiefs and doctors could not express themselves, even though they had things to say about the pandemic. Our system, our educational system, political system are emanations of our culture, which is why culture is very, very important. And in order to develop ourselves, we need to look inside our own culture. China and many African countries need to be aware of the importance of culture in international relations. We need to promote culture for peace. Peace is a must. There is a global continent, and it is built through peace. We need peace, because without peace, we cannot develop ourselves.
Nous devons mettre un accent particulier sur cette réalité. Enfin, pour terminer, Monsieur Lama et chers collègues, je ne sais pas, les responsables de l'Institut,
I would like to ask questions to the Universal Peace Federation. Is it a coincidence that this panel and this conference is held on the 11th of September? Is it a coincidence or not? 19 years ago, on 11th of September 2001, peace was endangered through the terrorist attacks which happened in New York with the Twin Towers. And I think that we can all reflect on this catastrophe and think about all the people who brutally lost their lives unjustly also that day. And this example, like a lot of others, must make us want to fight for peace and development. Peace is not negotiable in international relationships. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. So many good advice and good suggestions how we can have new partnership, new relations between Europe and Africa and beyond. And thank you also for reminding us that without peace, there is no development. And a special thank to remind us about September 11. We have a very special memory for all those innocent lives that died on this day. And we pray for them. And we pray that never again this kind of thing happen in the world. So thank you very much for your presentation. That was really deep. Let me now move to the third presenter of today's session, or for this session. The next speaker is His Excellency Albin Kurti, former Prime Minister of Kosovo. His Excellency Albin Kurti graduated in computer science and telecommunications from the University of Pristina. In June 2005, he co-founded Movement for Self-Determination, of which he was the president until March 2015. Albin Kurti is currently serving his third term in office as a member of the Assembly of the Republic of Kosovo. He was the movement's candidate for the Prime Minister of Kosovo and was re-elected as the president of the Movement for Self-Determination in January 2018. He served as the fourth Prime Minister of the Republic of Kosovo. Your Excellency, you have the floor for your presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Mr. Adama Doumbia. Dear organizers of the Universal Peace Federation, Honorable Excellencies, allow me to begin by greeting the panelists and all the participants and the audience of this imposing webinar, to greet and thank the organizers, Mr. Katsumi Otsuka and Mr. Jacques Marion, and to greet and especially thank the leaders of the Universal Peace Federation, its numerous sub-organizations, the Honorable President, Mr. Thomas Walsh, and in particular, the historical co-founder and leader of the Federation, Her Ladyship, Mother Moon. In the Albanian language, the essence or the core of the word përshëndetje, which is our most common greeting, is the word shëndet, which means health. Therefore, first of all, I wish you health. I wish you good health. Thank you for bringing us together in this webinar to discuss about hope and opportunities in times when we most need them. The entire world and each of our regions and countries are stricken by threefold crises. First off, a health crisis, the novel coronavirus pandemic that is still continuing until a successful vaccine or a medicine will be found. Allow me to express my condolences to you and the countries you represent for every human life lost during this pandemic. Secondly, an economic crisis, which is deepening the depression of the global economy, more or less in stagnation since 2008. Health and economy are the two most fundamental aspects of the human well-being. And the third crisis, which is overtaking us consequently, is the crisis of democracy, expressed through authoritarian leaders who want to put down people, people's history and culture, their prosperity and future. But as many people, ancient and modern, have noted, in every crisis there may hide an opportunity, and we must keep our eyes and hearts open and our senses and minds sharp to catch opportunities in a time like this. Businessmen will certainly find their way to profit. That's their aim. And they will hold to their opportunities. That's their way. But we, as politicians that run for public office, we seek another kind of opportunity and profit. Not one-sided profit, but a more general profit for the society, for our nations, for our regions and continents, and for the entire world, our common humanity, our human race. And again, not the opportunity for the few who are privileged, but for the many who are in need, for the many that democracy needs to exist and thrive. My dear friends, the economic crisis was already here. What we're facing now is a deepening of it. This may be a possibility to reflect, to see critically what didn't work, and to build the mechanisms for progressive change. What we already know, for this change to happen, it must be international. How can it look like? I can speak from my perspective, coming from a country in the poorest region of Europe, Kosovo and the Balkans. What we face here is the monopolization of many sectors of the market in a model well known to the analysts of Eastern Europe. These monopolists or oligarchs wield tremendous power. It is impossible for normal, ordinary businessmen to compete against them, or to even start a business or bring new investments for that matter. Therefore, our determination for good governance and democratization of the economy is indispensable. In my country, COVID-19 has worsened the situation which was hopeless to begin with. The economy is in stagnation, and it is forecasted that our GDP will shrink by 3% this year, according to OECD. This will further increase unemployment, which was already at the highest level in Europe. Around 10% of those employed have been reported to have lost their jobs, according to UNDP. But given the large share of the informal economy, this number is much higher. For 4 months during our brief tenure in government, we managed not only to contain the spread of the virus, but to also inspire a new sense of hope for change in the whole country and the region. People now want us back so we can all together move forward. Now I want to talk a bit regarding the current dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia, which is unfolding at a time when the focus must be on the health of our citizens and the economy. We need peace in the Balkans, not temporary peace, but sustainable peace, just and democratic peace, which addresses and resolves all issues and puts hatred and anger behind. But peace derives from goodwill and good intentions. Every time we're willing to extend our hand to Belgrade, we find a clenched fist. Unfortunately, their ability for disruption and destruction outperforms their ability to cooperate and build. This is a problem. We cannot make meaningful progress for as long as the focus is not on accepting the reality and looking towards the future, but grasping onto the ideas of the past. The past has been full of rivalry, conflict, bloodshed, and genocide. The fear and bitterness of the past can guide us toward the past, because for future, we require forward-looking leaders. Every historical period faced its own crisis, moments when people ceased to believe in progress whatsoever and nihilism prevailed. But eventually, there always appeared new movements in arts, in science, and in politics, and also in interpersonal relationships, which brought new concepts and made new steps for progress. This is what we mostly need right now, a new concept of progress that doesn't jeopardize people's traditions and everyday norms, morals and identities, a concept of progress that does not eliminate the local particularities, but that calls for everybody to participate in a progress which everyone and all of us can benefit from. Just and fair progress. We cannot look away from poverty, hunger, genocide, and disease because this is no longer an issue for one country to solve. When there is a conflict in one country, there is a refugee crisis in other countries. When there is a disease in one country, it travels to all the countries. So we must act not merely as citizens of one country, but as citizens of the world. In this, there's a role for every country, no matter how big or small, and for every citizen to play. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. That was really very, very deep. I remember what you said, a very strong statement. Peace derives from goodwill and good intentions. We hope that through this whole series of presentations and this ILC, we can help the different stakeholders to develop those good intentions. And we definitely pray and support peace in the Balkans. The fourth speaker for this session will be from Africa, former Prime Minister of Burkina Faso in West Africa, His Excellency Luc Adolphe Thiaw. Beyond Luc Adolphe Thiaw was the Prime Minister of Burkina Faso from 2011 to 2014. He graduated of several universities in Africa and outside the continent. Throughout his professional career, he has held numerous positions in the media and in the areas of communication and diplomacy. In particular, he was a Director General of the State Press Group, Sidouaya, President of the Higher Council of Communication in his country, Ambassador of Burkina Faso to France, and accredited to Holy See, Portugal, the Kingdom of Spain, UNESCO, and the International Organization of La Francophonie. He's a very good friend of UPF and has been always present whenever we need him for those programs, ILCs and conferences. Monsieur le Premier ministre, vous avez la parole. Your Excellency.
Voilà. Merci, Monsieur le coordonnateur. Je voudrais une fois de plus remercier la FPU à travers ses responsables, dont Madame Catherine Rigné, pour l'honneur qui m'est fait de m'associer à ces débats d'une grande importance. Chers amis, en tant que communicateur, je pense que la COVID-19 a offert au monde une opportunité de valoriser la technologie de la communication et lui a donné une dimension humaine et même humaniste. Je salue dans ce sens la vision du docteur Hak Jahan Moon d'avoir engagé très tôt la FPU à travers le monde dans une dynamique virtuelle à l'échelle internationale d'une ampleur jamais expérimentée. Si je me réfère à notre dernier débat lors du rallye de l'espoir organisé le 9 août dernier, et je pense qu'il a réuni plus d'1 million de personnes. Les webinaires de la FPU ont brisé les frontières de l'isolement dans lequel le monde s'était enfermé face au coronavirus. Madame la Présidente,
coronavirus. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, our debate today, which follows on from that of the Rally of Hope, invites us to reflect deeply on the theme, opportunities and hope in time of crisis, interdependence, mutual prosperity, and universal values. In fact, the elements of this theme have always been at the heart of the thoughts and vision of Dr. Sung Myung Moon and his wife Hak Jahan Moon. COVID-19 has confirmed the interdependence of nations, the relevance of which has always been revealed in their teachings. We have each a reading of the pandemic has handled across the world. And each has seen how the world has. She highlighted the selfishness of men and states, insofar as in such situation, it is always the poorest within states who have paid the highest price. And moreover, poor countries have been virtually marginalized, both in healthcare and in search of basic solutions, such as the vaccine. In this situation, how, as African citizens, have experienced the highlights of the pandemic? There was the fear conveyed by the great communication channels of the North, which almost heralded the annihilation of our continent, which has no means of resisting the pandemic. Thanks to God and the voluntarism of governments, African countries have been spared for the time being from the health catastrophe. The second observation I make is that COVID-19 has been used as a weapon of war in the geopolitical and economic confrontation of the powerful people in the world. This competition between states in vaccine development tells us about the materialist ideology that dominated the world today. The pandemic and its management have highlighted the issue of transparency in the management of information on the international scene. Madam President, what we Africans expect is no longer to continue to be spectators of major global issues. In this regard, the coronavirus has confirmed the marginalization of Africa on the international scene. Notwithstanding our own responsibilities in this marginalization, the coronavirus, by its very nature, since it strikes without distinction, rich and poor, both north and south, east and west, black and white, calls on the world for cultural change, calls on the world for cultural change to better adapt for the new challenges. We cannot measure what they will be tomorrow. The health crisis triggered by the coronavirus pandemic requires a paradigm shift in international relations. It requires from the rulers a global and united response, real planetary solidarity. It also supposes our capacity to imprint on the world new values for the very reason for our existence. Some are rightly calling for an overhaul of the economic system, which so far has not led to shared happiness, which until then maintains inequality and injustice, as the Prime Minister of Malta. So how can we change all of this? How do we bring a new paradigm of internal and external faith? The answer lies in the transformation of man himself as the creation of the Heavenly Father. The teachings of Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, following on those of her husband, calls in this sense for a new culture centered on God, the family, universal values, and living for the sake of others. If humanity is inhabited by these values, peace, solidarity, and fraternity can only prosper in the world. At this time, it is evident that our world will quickly find solutions to unexpected and large-scale crises like COVID-19. We must therefore encourage and support the initiatives of the Mother of Peace in her crusade for the world of justice, love, peace, and solidarity. Dr. Hak Jahan Moon understood that COVID-19, beyond desolation, is an opportunity to bring together men and women bound by the same destiny on this earth. This is why I think that the debates that UPF is organizing on the state of the world in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic for some time now through the magic of the webinar must have an echo in all international bodies at the level of each country. The quality of debates is such that it will be a shame if these debates do not reach the greatest numbers of leaders and decision makers. I express, and it is a proposition that I am making. I think that the United Nations can take the vision of UPF in an international leadership on the issue of COVID-19. I express here my admiration for the vision of Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, which allows UPF to imprint its leadership on the issue of COVID-19 and the future of the world at the moment where international and regional cooperation organizations caught in the health emergency are in fact turning in on themselves. So I want to take the declaration of the Emeritus Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, was right to say last month that UPF will become a cornerstone in building lasting peace in the world. I'm convinced that not only will the world defeat the coronavirus, but also and above all, that it represents an opportunity to build a new world. And I really thank
you very much.
Thank
you so much, Your Excellency. Your Excellencies, it's really amazing how the concern of the participants and the concern of the panelists are the same. There are many questions on the chat room, but when I listen to all the four panelists, they have covered all the questions. To my surprise, but I was not expecting less than that, actually. So before we give the floor to Chairman Kativigne for a message of goodwill, let me anyway give you a chance to give final word by answering also one question each. Let us be brief here, and then we will go toward the end of this session. My first question will go to the first speaker, former President Kolero Treka. I think you already touched this point, but can you please summarize it? As a prominent leader of the European nation in closest proximity to Africa, and one that has a significant African diaspora, what are the three things, or even just two things, that Europe can do best to right the past or present failings toward Africa, if you see any failing?
Well, I would go for more than three things, I can tell you. However, let me put two main things that come to mind. First and foremost, change the perception of how Europeans look at Africa. The issue of the donor-recipient sort of relationship, but actually acknowledge that the African continent is a land of opportunity, but also the need for the empowerment of our children and communities and nations to ensure that the value of inclusion, the value of appreciating each other's cultures are really embedded in the way we relate to one another in terms of the two continents. Then I would like to see Europe really engage in sustainable partnerships of equals between African states, European states, between the European Union, the African Union, to explore the way so that we can together develop and grow. And then obviously one can look for the sustainability of our economies. I would like to see a holistic approach in terms of also the way we can assist each other to build capacity for the young people of Africa in particular. This is, I would, well, I do believe in bringing the experts to the table. And I have, as I have said in my contribution, Africans are the experts on their own needs, on their own development and their own way of looking at things and how they would want to see their countries and continents to go forward. And therefore, Europeans have to provide more space for this important dialogue between us. And another important point, and I'm very pleased that the Prime Minister of Gabon has spoken so much about peace, and in actual fact he said without peace we cannot develop ourselves. Yes, without peace there can never be prosperity, there can never be well-being. Whatever we do, without peace we can do nothing. Therefore I would another change I think that is really needed is that in no way, no European state should be a facilitator of fewer conflicts in the African country, in any African country. The arms industry, which is to me a very contentious point in this sense.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Kolero Preka. Thank you very much for your contributions. A question to, should I ask directly to Prime Minister Kurti before I leave Europe? Would a policy of the part of European nations of making much greater investment into Africa to create jobs and prosperity there help solve the refugee crisis and better for both Africa and Europe than just the current policy of spending huge sums of money to prevent illegal African migration to Europe? What is your take on that?
Thank you very much for this question, which also entails the answer within it. I must emphasize that people want to stay and be and work together. People want to integrate. In globalized world, we should integrate economy. And integrating economy means moving towards integrating investments and decreasing inequality. People integrate and are peaceful as much and then as long as they feel equal, that they can share, they can give and take. One of my favorite poets, French poet Paul Valéry, he once said that Mediterranean is factory of civilizations. And I think we shall never forget that. Mediterranean is not something which divides us, it's something that we come from. So Mediterranean is factory of civilizations, and it will continue to be so. What I want to say by this is that across Mediterranean on both coasts, north and south. We need people and economy to move so we all prosper.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. The answer seems to be in the question, but you put more answers, and we are very grateful for that. Thank you very much. The next question for Prime Minister Mba, Monsieur le Premier Ministre. You already mentioned, you gave many ideas. Can you just give one or two? What are the current, the main areas in which Europe and Africa can best cooperate to mutual advantage? Prime Minister Mba. Les domaines de coopération dans lesquels l'Afrique et l'Europe peuvent coopérer pour un bénéfice mutuel. Vous avez déjà touché ce point. Pouvez-vous résumer en 2 ou 3 phrases, s'il vous plaît?
En réalité, M. Adama, il y a plusieurs aspects. Hein.
In reality,
Un ou deux.
I will just tackle 2 aspects because there are many. The first one is that we really need to take the most out of the mutual capabilities, those that exist in Africa and those that exist in Europe. Notably, in the domain of health and medicinal herbs, we have a lot to bring.
Donc, sur le plan scientifique, sur le plan de la recherche scientifique.
And on the in scientific research, we have things to bring, and also regarding communication. In Africa, we do not communicate well. And that's why we cannot have a lot of opportunities to contribute to the world development, but we should communicate more. The education field is very important in that regard. And we must reach agreements to have joint education programs in all sectors in order to meet the needs of populations on both continents. We need to work together to build peace so that there will be the least conflicts. I am not certain that there will be no conflicts at all, but we must reduce the number of conflicts and also their frequency, and especially reduce the negative effects of those conflicts so that there will not be violence against the lives of the people. There must be many other aspects, but these are the ones that come to my mind at the moment.
Mais qui dit commerce dit avant tout la production, et j'en ai parlé tout à l'heure, la production nationale nous met d'accord pour produire davantage chez nous.
We need also to invest in business.
Ce dont on a besoin dans la vie.
Also,
voilà, M. Adama, si je peux dire à ce niveau-là.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. Yeah, so I think we have many other questions, and the next session is afternoon, so we will take some extra time here very shortly. There is a question for Prime Minister Chao. Myself, I'm a bit confused by the question, but the question is there. Somebody is asking how the COVID-19 crisis could help reconciliation in Africa, all the violence, the electoral crisis. What we have learned from the current COVID-19 crisis in terms of common destiny for nations. What do you think? How does it impact our future way of thinking and promoting reconciliation in Africa?
Oui, merci beaucoup. Il faut dire que dans la sous-région du Sahel où je vis, il y a sans doute le Covid qui a beaucoup impacté les élections qui se déroulent et qui vont se dérouler d'ici jusqu'à la fin de
In
l'année.
my country, the COVID-19 has impacted the elections very greatly, of course. When I look at my country, Burkina Faso, there have been terrorist attacks of a great magnitude. We have 2,000 people who lost their lives due to terrorism, and 2 million people which have been displaced in the country. And all of that, of course, has a great impact on the elections, which will be held next November. And we need to know if these elections could still be held or not, especially in some regions. So that's why this is a great problem for democracy in our country. As you underlined it, the coronavirus impacted negatively the economy of our countries. And so the means that we needed to put in place so that the elections could be held in a transparent way, these means are limited now. And we hope that things will go well, but we have a lot of questions. What I want to say is that this pandemic brought us to totally review our way of governance, because it is difficult to govern with what we cannot predict, imprevisibility in itself. The other aspect that you underline is the question of communication. The Prime Minister Paul Mba was saying that African countries do not communicate well. We cannot communicate well. And when we are faced with a pandemic like that, we do not know how to communicate with our people. And that's a great problem. In order to put in place prevention campaigns and also health campaigns and fight the pandemic. We need to have our own strategies. We cannot transpose what happens in other countries. So that's why we African countries need to reimagine the way we communicate. And that's how we will be best, can best contribute to the fight.
I thought it was a difficult question, but through your answer, we have learned a lot, Your Excellency. That's really, being myself an African, I can tell you that he touched very important point. As a decision made in the time of COVID-19 directly affect the social situation in many African countries, not only the elections, but the social atmosphere also. So to close this session, we will now listen to a message of goodwill from the chairman of UPF Africa, Mrs. Cathy Rigney, currently serve as the regional chairman of UPF Africa. She was sent by Reverend and Mrs. Moon to West Africa in 1975 and has devoted most of her life since then to the people of Africa. Her prime activity is to teach the peace-building principles of UPF and offer a new vision for peace and human development. She has received an honorary doctoral degree from the New Covenant International University and Theological Seminary, USA, honoring her work for a culture of peace, universal values, character education, and service to humanity. So Dr. Cathy Rigney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador Doumbia. Your Excellency, President Kolera Preka from Malta, Your Excellency, Prime Minister Paul Mba from Gabon, Your Excellency, Albin Kurti, Prime Minister Albin Kurti from Kosovo, and Your Excellency, Prime Minister Luke Chow from Burkina Faso. honorable participants to the ISCP session of this ILC 2020 webinar. Greetings to everyone. It is with a sincere feeling of gratitude that I would like to conclude this ISCP webinar session. First of all, I would like to thank all the panelists here, Your Excellencies, for having been able to address in a very insightful way the problems linked to the current crisis, global crisis, on the theme, A New Paradigm for International Relations in the Post-COVID Era. As heads of state, heads of government, and as ambassadors for peace, you have shown the way forward to building a peaceful and unified world centered on specific criterion. As you work together in the International Summit Council for Peace, ISCP, of which you are pioneers, you play an important role in suggesting solutions to the various critical problems our world is currently facing. Indeed, the International Summit Council for Peace, initiated by UPF co-founder Dr. Hak Ja-han Moon on February 8, 2019, at the occasion of the World Summit 2019 in Seoul, Korea, has been instrumental in addressing these issues, including issues such as climate change and environmental issues, religious conflicts, poverty, war, pandemics, corruption, and family breakdown. As you all know, we live in an interdependent world. No nation and no government exists in isolation. Many of our most difficult problems, such as terrorism, cybercrime, climate change, poverty, inequality, food insecurity, conflict, just to name a few, are transnational in nature. We must work together collaboratively in order to resolve global, regional, and national problems. Moreover, in order to carry out a comprehensive approach to peace and development, I think we must work across various sectors of society, including government, civil society, faith-based organizations, academia, and the private sector. The ISCP is a meeting place for world leaders, and it allows your wisdom and experience to be utilized and your initiatives to be discussed in the service of global peace and the betterment of humankind. As we look at our world today, it seems imperative that a new moral, ethical, and spiritual order be central to the issues and state initiatives we hope to initiate in order to give hope to humanity suffering at this particular moment in history. To conclude this very wonderful webinar, I would like to share the content of the declaration made by the True Mother of Peace, Dr. Hak Ja-han Moon, founder of UPF, at the last Rally of Hope in front of many heads of state, several heads of government, as well as in front of millions of virtual participants. And I quote, "If Heavenly Parent is at the center of a community of people united under the values of interdependence, mutual prosperity, and universal values, all problems can be solved. Peace can be achieved with God at the center of the universe. As leaders of this world, please let us bring back humankind from the self-centeredness, the extreme nationalism, the excessive materialism of our problematic organizations and institutions which have failed to successfully address worldwide problems. Let us seek the path where we include our Heavenly Parent in the daily lives of ourselves and of our world." Thank you very much for your participation, and I wish you all success in the following webinars that will take place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman Kathy. Please join me to give a round of applause to yourself as a panelist, because it was just brilliant. And as the IT team put us in gallery mode for a kind of souvenir photo for this session. We are in the era of IT, so we can take a souvenir photo even on the internet. That was really brilliant. I'm very honored to be the moderator, and that was a very good panel attended by many people. We had 4,000 people registered, but this program is being broadcast on YouTube and Facebook, Millions of people are watching us. Even a TV station in Mali has decided to broadcast it live. So I think we have learned a lot today from your precious contributions. And as we close, I would like to invite you to prepare, take a rest, eat quickly, and come back in exactly 2 hours for the next session. The next session is a very wonderful one. You will have a parliamentarian speaking. The moderator will be a brilliant lady, Mrs. Ida Wokesh from Austria, an author, educator, and public speaker. And you will have on the panel the Speaker of Parliament of Sao Tome and Principe, Delphine Santiago das Neves, and the Speaker of Parliament of Niger, Tini Husseini, and the Speaker of Parliament of Uganda, Right Honorable Rebecca Kadaga, plus, and from Europe side, the former Deputy Speaker from the Knesset, Israel, Honorable Ilik Bar, and from Russia, from the Duma, Honorable Umarov. There will be a message from IAPP Europe from Peter Heider. This is a session starting 2 hours from now. So quickly use restroom, eat something, and come back. I thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much. Here we conclude this session. Thank you, and see you in this afternoon. Bye-bye.